In 1487, a Dominican friar walked into a print shop in Speyer with a manuscript that would help set Europe on fire. But the fires didn't start for almost a century. And when they did, they burned brightest in the most modern corners of the continent. Let's turn the page. Most people picture witch hunts as a dark chapter of the Middle Ages. Peasants with pitchforks, monks with torches, a world soaked in fear and old magic. But that picture is wrong. The worst wave of witch trials in European history happened between 1560 and 1650. That's the age of Shakespeare, the age of Galileo, the age of the printing press. The bonfires that killed tens of thousands of people were not leftovers from some dim past. They were a product of the modern world being born. To see why, we need to go back much further, to a time when the church itself said witchcraft wasn't real. Sometime in the 9th century, a church text known as the Canon Episcopi spread through the monasteries of Europe. It dealt with a strange belief. Some women claimed they could fly through the night sky, following a pagan goddess on wild hunts across the clouds. The church's answer was blunt. These visions were tricks of the devil, not real events. And the sin was not witchcraft. The sin was believing it was real in the first place. A bishop who found someone clinging to such nonsense was told to correct them, scold them, maybe assign a penance, not burn them. For centuries, this was the official line. Belief in night flights and magic packs was treated as a sign of ignorance, not a crime worthy of death. For over 500 years, the most powerful body in Europe looked at claims of witchcraft and shrugged. But then letters started moving faster than pilgrims. When Gutenberg's press began to spread across Europe, it changed more than book prices. It changed what ideas could do. A rumor in one valley used to stay in that valley. A local fear of curses or bad harvests might spark a village quarrel, but it couldn't travel. Print changed that. Print could take a local suspicion and turn it into a system. It could give fear a structure, a logic, a set of instructions. Heinrich Kramer understood this. A Dominican inquisitor obsessed with the reality of witchcraft, Kramer wrote the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. Printed in Speyer in 1487, the book laid out a complete guide to finding, trying, and killing witches. It described how witches made pacts with the devil, how they caused the storms, how they cursed livestock, and it offered step-by-step advice for judges. What questions to ask, when to use torture, how to get a confession. Here's where it gets strange. The book flopped at first. The common story is that the Malleus hit Europe like a bomb, and churches everywhere grabbed copies. That's not what happened. Spain's Supreme Council of the Inquisition condemned the book. Not once, but repeatedly, calling Kramer's work reckless and rooted in poor reasoning. Spanish witch trials almost never cited the Malleus. The body most people blame for witch hunts looked at the manual and said no. That gap between myth and fact matters. It shows that the hunts were not some uniform wave of church madness. They were shaped by which courts, which laws, and which borders the accused lived near. But the printing press doesn't care who condemns a book. It cares about demand. Over the next century and a half, editions of demonology manuals kept rolling off the presses of the Holy Roman Empire. In the years right after the Malleus was published, only a handful of such titles appeared. By the middle of the 1500s, the number had surged. By 1600, it had exploded. Germany alone produced more than half of all demonology editions in Europe. Dozens of authors built on Kramer's framework. They added new terms, familiars, pacts, sabbaths. Each manual cross-referenced the others, weaving a dense web of ideas that judges could consult, quote, and apply. The printing press didn't just spread fear, it gave fear a shared language. Now picture the map of Europe around 1580. It's not a map of nations the way we know them. The Holy Roman Empire alone was a patchwork of hundreds of small states, free cities, bishoprics, and princely domains. Each had its own courts. Many had two, some had more. In a place like Lorraine, a person accused of witchcraft might face a local court, a regional court, and a church tribunal, each with different rules and different appetites for conviction. This splitting of power was the match that lit the powder. The worst killing happened exactly where you'd least expect it if witch hunts were about backward peasants clinging to old magic. The death toll was highest in the most legally complex, most politically divided, most religiously mixed parts of Europe. Regions where Catholic, Lutheran, and Calvinist lands pressed against each other like tectonic plates saw far higher execution rates than places with a single faith and a single strong ruler. Think about what that means. Each court in a border zone was trying to prove its piety. Each judge knew his neighbor across the line was watching. If the Catholic court in one town convicted a batch of witches, the Lutheran court in the next town felt the pressure to match or exceed that number. Witch trials became a kind of grim contest, a way for local rulers to show they took sin seriously and their rivals didn't. Secular courts drove this engine far more than church courts did. When a secular judge put someone on trial for witchcraft, torture was used in the vast majority of cases. Church courts, on the other hand, tortured far less often. They held longer trials. They allowed more appeals, and they let a much larger share of the accused walk free. The very courts that people blame the least were, in fact, the ones with more restraint. But here's the limit of this pattern. Not every split-up region exploded into mass trials. Parts of Eastern Europe had overlapping courts and weak central power, yet their witch trial records are thin. Scholars still argue about why. Some point to lower print output in those regions. Others suggest that the specific blend of Catholic-Protestant rivalry was the key ingredient, and where that rivalry was absent, the formula didn't ignite. The pattern is strong, but it's not universal. Understanding its edges makes the core argument sharper. Let's turn the page to the people caught in this machinery. The accused were not random. Most were women, and most of those women were past 50. Older, often widowed, sometimes living alone at the edge of a village. They were the easiest targets for a system that needed bodies to prove its seal. When a cow died, when a child fell sick, when the harvest failed, the question, "Who did this?" needed an answer. And the manuals provided a script. They told judges what to look for. They told neighbors what to suspect. They turned grief and bad luck into evidence of a crime. The obvious objection here is that local grudges drove these charges. Feuding neighbors, old debts, personal spite, and that's true. Village tensions were the spark in countless cases. But a spark without fuel doesn't make a fire. The fuel was the system. The manuals that defined what a witch looked like. The courts that competed for convictions. The borders that split authority into jealous pieces. Without that system, a neighbor's grudge might lead to a fistfight or a lawsuit. With it, it led to a pyre. Something else happened that popular culture almost always gets wrong. People assume that science and reason ended the witch hunts. The Enlightenment arrived, clear thinking replaced fear, and the burning stopped. That story is too clean. The decline began before the Enlightenment took hold, and it began with law, not philosophy. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 redrew the map of Europe. It didn't end religious conflict overnight, but it forced treaties, settled borders, and gave central governments more power over local courts. Within a generation, the makeshift courts that had run wild through the border zones began to lose their grip. Royal orders followed. Major criminal trials, including witchcraft, were moved to royal courts under tighter rules. The killing didn't stop because people suddenly became rational. It stopped because the legal machinery that produced it was taken apart, piece by piece, from the top down. Within a few decades, executions across Europe had dropped to almost nothing. The last official witch execution on the continent happened in Switzerland in 1782. By then, the world had moved on, but the myth hadn't. Within a century, the story was already being reshaped. Romantic writers and early historians pinned the witch hunts on the medieval church, on ignorant peasants, on a Europe that supposedly cowered in darkness before the light of reason. They inflated the death toll wildly. The real number, based on decades of careful archival work, is a tiny fraction of those claims. Every one of those deaths was a tragedy, but inflating them serves a myth, not the truth. That myth does something dangerous. It lets us think the witch hunts were a failure of the past, a symptom of ignorance, something that could never happen in a modern, literate, connected world. But the witch hunts were a product of exactly those things: literacy, connection, print, legal systems, state competition. The tools that were supposed to bring order brought destruction, because those tools amplified fear just as well as they amplified knowledge. Consider how the manuals worked. A judge in Strasbourg reads one printed in Nuremberg. He finds the same categories, the same questions, the same steps that a judge in Trier is using. For the first time, witch trials across hundreds of miles follow the same script. The press didn't create the fear of witchcraft. That fear was ancient. But the press made it standard, gave it a common form, and made it portable. A local panic could now become a regional policy. And regional policy could become a system that spanned the continent. Here is a question worth sitting with. If the printing press could turn scattered folk fears into a coordinated system of death, what can faster, cheaper, more widespread tools of communication do? The parallel is not perfect. Digital networks are not printing presses. But the pattern rhymes. A technology that lowers the cost of spreading ideas also lowers the cost of spreading panic. And when that technology meets split authority, where no single body can check the spread, the result is familiar. Every story has a thread that leads forward. If the mechanics of moral panic interest you, the next chapter is already waiting on this channel. Subscribe and it'll find you. The Canon Episcopi called witchcraft a dream. The printing press made the dream into a manual. And the modern state, still half-formed, still cracking along its seams, turned the manual into a death sentence. The fires that burned across Europe were not the last gasp of the Dark Ages. They were the first scream of the modern world.